Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I feel like we're at a birthday party for a very big building, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce to you someone who I really don't think I need an introduction for, but it's important for us to remember the important stewardship that she has felt and believed about our community and our state, and really our nation. So involved in our community. She is the leader of the New Orleans Saints and the New Orleans Pelicans, with so many other opportunities that she's brought forth to make this community a better place. Please welcome Mrs. Gayle Benson.
Thank you, Mark, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today at the Tulane Book Festival. I am so pleased to introduce today's panel celebrating the past and future of the Caesars Superdome. Over the Superdome's first 50 years, our beloved stadium has hosted literally thousands of Saints games, 6 NCAA basketball Final Fours, 5 college football national championship games, record-setting basketball games, iconic heavyweight boxing championships, and of course, a record-tying 11 Super Bowls. Yes. And if that were not enough, this versatile and innovative stadium has hosted almost every imaginable kind of event, ranging from the Rolling Stones, Mass with Pope John Paul II, Mardi Gras parades, and boat shows. It also served as a shelter of last resort when Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and severely damaged the stadium, causing many questions that were raised whether the Superdome and New Orleans could ever survive. Of course, not only did the Dome in the New Orleans area survive, both came back even stronger than ever to the resilience, courage, and stubbornness that is the very essence of the people and culture of our great city, New Orleans. While we have had our fair share of challenges when faced with adversity, there is no place in the world that comes together to help support our friends, neighbors, and families like New Orleans. The Superdome is a living symbol of that spirit of resilience and so beloved by the people of our city because it represents so much of what we value most. It is a place where we come together and celebrate with our family and friends, share our passion for the teams we love, and be reminded that there is so much more that unites us than divides us, something we need now more than ever in an increasingly paralyzed road. The newly transformed Caesars Superdome is also a great example of what we can accomplish when we collaborate, communicate, and work together to achieve something that truly benefits everyone. The renovation project took several seasons to complete, but even more time to create a plan that would allow us to continue hosting Saints games and major events during the process, as well as determine how to responsibly fund a project that would extend the life of this state's asset for many years to come. The result was a true partnership between the state of Louisiana and the Saints, in which we created a win-win for the people of our state and ensured the team's future in New Orleans for many generations to come. I am exceptionally proud to have been a part of this process and even more proud of the results of this project. The history of the Caesars Superdome is second to none. As a result of this truly transformative renovation, our stadium is good or better than any stadium in the country. As incredible as the Dome's history is, the future is even brighter. And we are all hard at work to bring many more world-class events to continue to build the legacy of our jewel of a stadium. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's panel, who have all seen firsthand the role our stadium has played on the world stage and in the heart of our great city. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Duncan, an extraordinary writer and passionate advocate for all things dear to our city. Dennis Lauscha, Saints and Pelicans president and native New Orleanian, and Doug Thornton, who has been an integral part in managing the Superdome and the renovation project on behalf of ASM Global and the state of Louisiana. Please enjoy, have a great afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benson. Let's go ahead and level set everyone right now. We're going to go back more than 50 years to the creation of the dome, the idea of the dome, and why is it where it is. So, Doug, why don't you lead us off in that conversation?
Well, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I think it's a classic story of you build it and they will come. Back in 1963, Mayor Vic Skiro asked Dave Dixon, and I see Frank Dixon, Dave Dixon's son here in the audience today, to see if New Orleans could attract an NFL franchise, and those were the days before the merger of the AFL-NFL. So for the next 3 years, Mr. Dixon would go on to host exhibition games right here on the campus of Tulane at the old Sugar Bowl Tulane Stadium. And through that process, the commissioner told Mr. Dixon that New Orleans would never get a football team unless they could build a stadium with a roof because the climate here is so difficult. You know, the games start, you start playing in August and September. It's very hot. So at that time, the Astrodome was being built. The story goes that Mr. Dixon and John McKithen went over to Houston. They toured the Astrodome, which is about 1 million square feet. We'll come back to that in a minute. John McKithen says, "I want one of those except bigger." And just several months later, the state approved the sale of bonds to create what we now know as the Louisiana Superdome. The NFL awarded the Saints organization a franchise in 1966, November 1st. I think it was 8 days later that the bonds were issued. The Superdome was going to be opened in 1972, but because of several factors, it was delayed. It did not open until 1975. The original Super Bowl, Super Bowl IX, I think, was supposed to be played here, Jeff, in the Superdome, but because it didn't open until August of 75, the Super Bowl was played in January of that year. So that Super Bowl was played on the campus here at Tulane. And of course, the rest is history. It opened in August of 1975, and it has had a tremendous impact on the city. You asked earlier about why Poydras Street. There's a story behind that, too. The late Jimmy Fitzmaurice, former lieutenant governor, he was with Kansas City Southern Railroad in his day job before he was lieutenant governor. And he told me this story many, many times. And for those in the audience who are old enough to remember this, there was a point in time when it was going to be placed in New Orleans East on land owned by a guy named Marvin Craddock's. And Dave was very desperate to get that stadium built. And Vic Skiro, I think, was running for mayor, and he was in the hospital, had surgery, and he announced that it's going to be built. We're going to build the Dome Stadium in New Orleans East. Well, a few days later, they decided that the better place would be on land owned by KCS Railroad. Jimmy Fitzmaurice brokered the deal for KCS to sell the land to the state with John McKithen. And Jimmy used to tell the story, when you were invited to the governor's mansion to the second floor, then you knew you were serious to talk to Big John. And they cut the deal that day, and the rest is history.
Wow, thank you. That's great history. Appreciate that. It's good history, yes. Dennis, if you could go back. Now, we're talking mid-'90s when you're first getting involved with the Saints, but you've seen the economic and cultural impact that it has had on not only the city, but the state. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, it's been quite amazing, obviously, and the history is great, but, obviously there's this gigantic and marvelous economic impact, but let me maybe start with cultural, too. One of the things, I oftentimes speak about this, but a couple of years back, actually it's been a couple decades now, I was in Seville, and there's the Seville Cathedral there, and for 1,000 years, Hagia Sophia, which was the gigantic cathedral, which is now Turkey, was the biggest in the world. And then the cathedral in Seville became the biggest for 100 years before St. Peter's was built. But I go back to the folks that built the Superdome, and if there's an inscription in the back of the cathedral in Seville that basically says, future generations will think we're mad because we built it so big. And, you know, I think what they did here, when they built it as big as they did, when you know, I think there might have been some folks who thought they were mad that this small town, mid-sized town, was building a facility that was truly the biggest building in the world up until that time. We can go on and on about all of the architectural and construction issues that had to be overcome. And again, where was it done? It was done in New Orleans, a small town. And we had true dreamers. And with regards to where it led, I mean, you know, I think the momentum coming out of the 1970s with the Superdome truly led, and I see Daryl here, probably led to our confidence in getting the World's Fair, which led to, in many respects, what we did with the aquarium, which led to the warehouse district, which, you know, we continue to go on and on and on what it has done for our city. So, but it took the dreamers. It took the folks like the folks that were in Seville hundreds and hundreds of years ago that said, you know, they're going to think we're mad, but we're going to go and we're going to do it. The other thing that I think culturally, which is so important about the Superdome, and certainly these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it was probably the first building, public building, for the community that was built, that was truly built to be integrated. I mean, just about every building up until that point was segregated. I mean, think about that. I mean, I know today we may find that hard to believe, but that building was built for the whole community to enjoy. Again, looking back, we say, oh, that's not a big deal. That's a gigantic deal, particularly in the South. And to Doug's point, with regards to us getting a franchise, we also had to show the NFL that we were an integrated community as well. And I certainly think that the Superdome played a key role in that integration. And the other thing I'll say that's so special about the Superdome for me, I mean, I can go on and on and on. I know we've run out of time here, but it's the community's building, you know. And again, I mean, absolutely no disrespect. I love what the convention center does. I love what other public buildings do. But people, all the citizens go to the Superdome, which is a little bit different. Folks may not wind up at the convention center, but they come and celebrate life in the Superdome, and that's what's so special. And our greatest of joys, and then, as I'm sure you know, was reported, I want to say in our worst times, it was that lifeboat for the community, and so I'm very proud of that building.
Very good. You know, a lot of people say it's like coming home when they go into the Dome. It's their second home. Jeff, you've chronicled the Superdome, the Saints for many years, and the Superdome as well, now the Caesars Superdome. Historically, what's the significance? What do you see and as you kind of look at the map around the country and you come back and see what's happening in our state, in our city?
Well, I think Dennis and Doug touched on a lot of the economic and communal value, the spiritual value, right, of this building. I think it's important, Doug, you talked about the history of the time, put in context where New Orleans was when they built this stadium. Dennis talked about the Dreamers. I mean, this was a city that was kind of on the way down. I think the transition at the time, business-wise, was going away from the port and going away from oil and gas to some degree, and transitioning in the city to a tourism-based economy. And this was the catalyst. This building was the catalyst for everything that's happened since then, as far as, and Mrs. Benson talked about all these incredible events that have come here, but it came at a very important time in our city's history, and it took a dreamer, like Dennis was saying, it took dreamers to realize that in a city that, frankly, had a lot of these grandiose ideas that never had come to fruition. I think the Superdome gave a sense of pride to people in the city that went beyond just the economic value. Like Dennis said, we could build something here that was better than anywhere else. And we hadn't done a lot of that. Remember, we lost like Disney World. We had a chance to get Disney World here. We still can't synchronize the lights on Canal Street. But we've got a damn good football stadium, right? And I think that was important at the time. And I was thinking coming over here today, What other building in the world, in the entire world, has housed under one roof the dignitaries, the celebrities, Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, Tom Brady, 3 different sports, 3 icons in that stadium, a future president in that stadium, the Pope, we mentioned the Pope, Mick Jagger, Frank Sinatra, Madonna. I mean, the biggest stars in the world at all these different events. What's the value of having that in our city? It doesn't happen if we don't have that stadium. So I think it goes beyond a dollar value, in my opinion. And historically, I mean, I think it's still, correct me, it's the history of the Register of Historic Places. I don't know how many stadiums are on that list. Can't be too many. But I think the vision realized in a city that hadn't had a lot of them realized, I think that's the significance of that building.
Yeah, don't forget Taylor Swift as well. So let's go back, and Dennis, you were on the front lines. Doug, you were there. You actually lived it. And Jeff, you saw it happen. Katrina. The stadium is home for 33,000 evacuees, 33,000 plus. The roof is torn off. Take us through those 5-6 days, and then Dennis, as it relates to
Doug do that.
coming back.
We've only got 29 minutes.
You are on the receiving side. I hear you. Yes.
Well,
Go ahead, Doug.
I'll try to make it brief. No one expected that it would be used as a refuge of last resort. If you remember, we had Hurricane George that hit in 1998. It was opened for the first time ever as a refuge of last resort during that period. One major difference, we never lost power, never lost water pressure, roof didn't come off, people were able to leave the next day, okay? We didn't have a major flood. Katrina's pressing us. The mayor, governor decided to open it because there was no other place to go. No one expected the levees to breach water in the Poydras Strait. We didn't think we'd be there 5 days. It was a terrible situation. Hopefully it never happens again. But the rebuilding process, going back in there for the first time, I was there for 5 days, came back, the following week, and Jeff was with me, actually, on one of the trips back in there. We had to wear respirators, hazmat suits. It was terrible. I personally did not think that it would ever recover. 1 year later, we play a football game. It was a remarkable effort. The entire community rallied. Many of the men and women who worked on that job, their fathers built the dome. And I always say that they did not want to fail. They knew that failure would cause us to be set back. If we couldn't have played that football game on Monday night, we become Pittsburgh after the steel mills closed, okay? I'm just being honest with you. We're another city, and it's not the same. It literally, that night, changed the course of history. Could have gone the other way. But those 800 men and women that fought every week to put that building back together and meet that deadline are the real heroes, because it took that kind of effort over 12 months. Now, we didn't finish the whole thing. Dennis remembers we played football. We played a football game with no carpet in the suites and no countertops, folding chairs. No one cared. You know why? Because they were living like that at home. Their homes were gutted. But I remember the commissioner, telling me on the phone. He says, "I don't care if we have folding chairs, or you don't even have to have all the seats in the terrace. You get me turf, a video board, and make it safe for the fans, and we'll play football." So we did.
Very good. And we know the rest is history. We
Yeah,
actually won that night.
It was gigantic, right? It's probably, obviously, the most proud I've ever been in my career, perhaps outside of the Super Bowl. But to Doug's point, the work that went on in that year was overwhelming. I mean, the hours, the decisions to get that building. And I give the workers, Doug, his crew, a tremendous amount of credit. The other point to that, which was kind of interesting, and we don't really talk a lot about this, but for some of the older folks in the room, you may remember our relationship between the Saints and the state up until Katrina was a very contentious relationship. We were trying to figure out for a long time whether or not the building was the right building, whether or not the market was the right size market, and there were a number of actually second floor governor's mansion with Governor Foster in 2000, and long story short, a lot of things happened, but there were two plans that we formed two blue ribbon committees. One was on building a new stadium and one was on renovating a new stadium. And, we never knew then, but that renovation blue ribbon committee Bible, a book, if you will, really came in tremendously handy because we had did the work and we knew what we had to do, and Doug and I and his team and our team had really discussed a lot about, all right, where were we going with the renovations, and so that happened. So we were lucky to have had that. Yeah. The other thing that is my favorite picture outside of Super Bowl or something like that is the kickoff that night. And if you look at it, it's a very wide picture, and it's they're kicking the ball off, and it's obviously Saints in Atlanta, and you could used to be able to buy them in bookstores and poster, But if you looked in the real corner, it was me and Doug going at it with each other. And we were really, I shouldn't say going, we were discussing that night. It was an unbelievable night, but we were discussing how we were going to turn the page and not let the past problems of the past affect us going forward. We were so moved by that night. We were so moved by what had accomplished that night. We both said, all right, we're going to bury every hatchet that we've ever had, not that we had many, but it's the entire focus is going to be how we can make this building great, how we're going to figure out how we make our team great, we can figure out how to make the city great, and it was a new day from a negotiation standpoint. They understood what we needed to have accomplished. I understood what their reservations were and what they needed to get done, and it led basically. Now it's we're looking at 20 years, and we really have had harmony between the team and the state, and you know this. I mean, how many teams really have that much harmony over 20 years in professional sports?
Very rare.
Very rare.
Yeah.
And we just, it's going to lead to the next 15, 20 years. And so it was a horrible, horrible event, but I think it made us better at the end of the day.
So, Mark, I always, the way I think about the Superdome over the 50 years is it's like chapters in a book. The first chapter was 1975 through the late 80s, when the Superdome was literally the catalyst for putting New Orleans on the map as the sports destination and the hotels sprouting up around New Orleans, okay? As Jeff said, the economy in New Orleans was oil and gas, port, and some latent tourism. And it flipped in the 80s and 90s into tourism, oil and gas, port. Or maybe it's tourism, port, oil and gas now. I don't know, but it flipped. Then I think about the ugly chapter, and that is when, what Dennis is talking about, the early 2000s, and then Hurricane Katrina. It was a very dark moment. None of us thought it could. I've envisioned it almost in the human characteristics like a cancer patient being brought back to life. And then it regained its rightful place in history. And it's undergone this renaissance in the last 15 years. And just think about the events that we've hosted, Jeff. There's been at least 10 college football championships, 2 Super Bowls now, 3 Final Fours, WrestleMania twice. I mean, it just goes on and on. Yeah. So we have this like a chapter, chapters in a book.
Yeah. And Doug, I'm sorry, I mean, one quick thing. We failed to mention this, too. This is an unbelievable deal. Without the Superdome, you don't have the arena either. I don't know if folks realize that when the arena was built, much, if not all, I shouldn't say all, but much of the infrastructure and back of house and mechanics run off of the Superdome's power plant. And so not only is it, carrying the load of the Superdome, it's also carrying the load of the arena as well.
That's right.
And I would argue that it's probably the most valuable commodity in our city next to the French Quarter. It certainly was the biggest project of the 20th century in our city. And to see it not only realize expectations, but kind of exceed expectations. It's been better than everyone thought, and they thought big back then. I think John McKithen, I read a story I was researching before I came over here. John McKithen told Dave Dixon, this is going to be the biggest building in the history of mankind when he pitched him. And I think he was right. I mean, that's a big statement. I'm prone to hyperbole sometimes as a columnist, but that ended up being true. And I think that doesn't happen very often.
No. You know what's interesting, Jeff, and Daryl knows, we have a slide that we project when we are talking about New Orleans and we're selling New Orleans. We call it the Golden Triangle. The French Quarter has been here 300 plus years. And it's the reason people have been coming for a long time. The Superdome was the demand generator that put us on the map as a sports destination. The World's Fair gave us the convention center, which has now been expanded. And they're less than a mile from each other. That's why we call it the Golden Triangle. What sits in between? 26,000 hotel rooms. That makes us unique. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, I think that's why you saw such a successful Super Bowl. And Jeff, we had a record number of media here for the games, something like 6,400, largest ever for a Super Bowl from around the world. And you spoke with a lot of them. And I'd like to get a sense from you, what do your peers tell you or express to you about the Caesars Superdome?
You mean other than the free food and drink we get? Other than that? No, obviously what Doug's alluding to. I mean, journalists are no different than fans, right, or than any of us. That location that Dave Dixon and the original fathers of our city ended up landing on, and I'd read Lakefront too, was a possibility back in the early planning stages. But putting that stadium there was so brilliant because it allows everyone to walk to the game. I don't think we get as many Super Bowls here without that location. If you've seen, Las Vegas is going to be a competitor for us in the future. Las Vegas has a very small kind of down strip, but it's not as walkable of a city as New Orleans. I think having that dome there for journalists to be able to go, and then I think it's also important to note the climate-controlled environment is important to the league. I mean, the league doesn't want to have an event of this scale in cold, inclement, rainy weather, which is what happened a lot of times. The first 3 Super Bowls right down campus here were uncharacteristically very cold, damp conditions. And a lot of foibles happened indirectly because of that. I think having the vision to have it indoors in this, as we all know, living here, you never know what you're going to get from day to day, but all my peers will tell you New Orleans is the #1 Super Bowl site. They'd like to have it here every year, if possible. And I think the league would tell you that, even though they can't say it publicly.
Right. Well, we're hoping, right?
Yeah.
Dennis, obviously home stadium, the Saints, but take us in a world where we don't have the Saints and we don't have the Superdome. What is New Orleans?
I don't. Right now, we're the 59th largest market in New Orleans, which is 59th largest in the country, MSA, which isn't good. I mean, when we owned Fox 8, right after Katrina, we were 50th. I mean, look at some of this MSA numbers. New Orleans lost over 4% of its population since 2000, and the only other 2 cities that lost 4% or more were Shreveport and Lake Charles in the entire country. And so I know we're doing things to change that around, and I know we want to play a part in that. But I would say this, is that going back to what the folks did back then, talking about having the best building in the world, I tell people we're in a very competitive business. We have to be #1 in everything we do. We tell our employees constantly, you have to have the mindset of we want to be #1. And some people kind of shy away from that. Some folks that come to work for me, what do you mean you want to be #1 at all costs? And they're like, obviously, we want to be #1. We want to have the best stadium. We want to have the biggest building. We want to, and like, why? Why do you want that? And I think it's so important because in our community, we're not #1 in a lot. And I want to lead and be aspirational for our entire community that we can be #1 and we should not accept #2. And if you look around our city right now, and I'm only speaking positively, I know I start off negatively, I'm very much glass half full. I look at some of the people in the room that I know. I mean, there's so much more to do, and there's so much more to do around the Superdome. I mean, we peek down the way. I mean, there's so much we could be doing that charity, regardless. I mean, again, I don't want to jump into the political part of it, but that building's been here since 2025. Why isn't it renovated like the Superdome? I mean, we as a community should not allow that. There's been talk for the last 20 years on a new city hall. There's been talk about a new CDC. There's been talk about so many other things, Duncan Plaza, so many things in our neighborhood. Doug and I talk about it all the time. We need to have the vision that these folks had back in the 70s. We need to have the vision that Darrell and his colleagues had in the 70s and 80s as it related to the World's Fair or Jack's Brewery. Or it's time for us to step up and really get going here, because we really are falling behind, and falling behind is unacceptable. I mean, I hate to say this, and I don't want to be blunt, and please, I don't want to read about this in the press, please, but I mean, after we're long gone, I mean, you don't put professional sports teams in the 59 largest markets or 60th, and if we continue to fall, it's not about what we've done, it really is about our future. And you know, it's up to us in this room. And I mean, we take it very serious. I know there's some other folks in this room that I work with every day. We take it very serious. We got to get our act together and get moving here. So again, the Superdome is really our North Star. And whenever we get down, we got to look at it and say, hey, this is what happens when we care about being number one.
Right.
This is what happens in our community when we care about having the best, not okay, not we'll get by. It's the best. And that's what we need to strive for, in my opinion.
You know, forced deadlines. Thank you. We talk about forced deadlines, getting things done, having to get things done, and certainly we had to get something done to have Super Bowl 59 here. Doug, take us through the renovation to get us to this point. Put on a game and an event that was seen around the world, setting expectations for the future. And what's next?
Well, let me answer that by saying I want to talk about how these buildings work and what, the functionality of them. These buildings are designed to really functionally last for 30 years. They're bonded for 30 years. The pieces and parts will last, 20, 30 years, some cases less. So the Superdome, if you think 30 years, we're at 50 years. We're almost all the way through our second life cycle of this building. So how were we able to preserve it and keep it top shelf like Dennis is talking about? A lot of investment over time. With Katrina, we were able to completely repair it. We didn't have an opportunity to really upgrade it. We came back in 2009 and 10 and did some upgrade work, but this most recent renovation, we did exactly what Dennis talked about. We stepped back and we said, how can we be very bold and think like the original founders of the Dome, out of the box, and create something that is really going to last for another 25, 30 years into that next life cycle, that 30-year life cycle. So with sitting down with the architects, we're just building operators and football team operators. We can't think in 3D. They came up with this great idea of taking out the ramps. Well, what buildings today in American history do you see that have ramps? No building. They all have scissor stairs, for fire exit. That freed up 110,000 square feet of space. That's a lot of space. Imagine this room is probably 20,000 square feet, so 5 times this size, okay, on both sides of the stadium. So we were able to reclaim that space. Remember I mentioned earlier, the Astrodome is 1 million square feet. That is significant because it was the first dome stadium built in the world. And the ones after that were all 1 million square feet. RCA Dome, Detroit. They're all gone. You know why? Because their envelope was 1 million square feet. We've got 2 million square feet under roof because it's the biggest building in the world, right? And that enabled us to come in and really think out of the box. And with the help of the Saints, we programmed it in a way to be very, very modern and celebrate the fan experience. It was all about improving our fan experience. We wanted wider concourses, more concessions, more restrooms, more vertical transportation. Those were big goals for us. And knowing that the state would not be able to fund the whole thing, Saints stepped up, said, we'll pay for a big portion of that, a third of it. The LSED, which is the governing body of the Superdome, was able to refinance. We were able to refinance our debt. It was not easy. It was 4 years. Team couldn't move out. They couldn't go play somewhere else for 2 years. That's disruptive, wouldn't have worked. So we had to work around the 4 seasons, and it was a challenge. And then we had an unexpected event, COVID, unforeseen. Costs went up, labor, materials. We had to shut down for a while. But it was a difficult process, but I will tell you the outcome was well worth it. So what's next? What can we do now? There's always work to be done. There were some things that we didn't get to do for budget reasons and schedule reasons. We want to replace all the seating in there. The fixed seats in certain areas are still 20, 30 years old, so they need to be replaced. There's always back-of-house things. Dennis likes me to talk about the back-of-house that don't generate revenue.
Not my business.
The electrical switchgear, things like that need to be replaced. These are all pieces and parts that are normal repair, capital improvement. But then there's the entire campus, with the arena, Champion Square, the Hyatt, the intersection of that sports district. There's so much more we can do to anchor that campus.
Very good. Dennis, Saints, obviously, you're playing in what we believe is the best stadium now in the NFL. You have a wish list?
Yeah, win the Super Bowl. I mean, that's we're always. No, to Doug's point, I think it never ends, right? And I'll give a lot of credit to Doug. And again, it's kind of funny how we used to argue so much, and now I'm giving him credit up here on the stage, which is. But Doug has done, and his staff have done an outstanding job of keeping the building not just clean, but updated, working properly. I started in '98, and in '98 we thought we needed a new building. So I literally went on a world tour of every stadium in America, and at that time, a lot of them were brand new, and they were beautiful, they were shiny, and everything else. And then over the course of the next 10 years, I'd go back to those stadiums, and I could tell you, a lot of them were somewhat deplorable and actually kind of sad to see the upkeep of their stadium for whatever reason. That has not been the case in New Orleans. Like I said, they do an outstanding job, and I think because they pay so much attention to it and they do keep it up the way they do, it allows us to do what we're doing now. But to Doug's point, the other thing that we talk about being number one in something. I mean, Doug didn't say it, but they deserve a lot of credit too. I mean, on time and on budget, essentially. There were some items that went over budget, but that was strictly related to a COVID situation. But if you took COVID out, you go back to 2005 renovation after Katrina. You go back to what we did after 2009. And you go back to what we did, I am not exaggerating, everything on time and on budget. Now, how many projects in the state of Louisiana on time, on project for every single one? And that's a credit to the folks that we had working on the project, very proud of that. But moving forward, Doug is absolutely right. This last renovation was less geared towards revenue generation and more geared toward fan experience. But I'm surprised he hasn't said this stat because he says it all the time, which is, we did a poll, or he did a poll on our fans on whether or not you want to build a new stadium, or you want a new Superdome, or you want a new dome, but we'll keep the dome we have. And was it 87%?
It was almost 90%.
90% said we want a renovated stadium. And so we said if we're going to be here long term, we're going to really try to make this super fan friendly, and that's what we attempted to do in this last renovation. Doug and I always say it's just about money. If we can find more money, we'll do it. But there are 2 or 3 more, I'll call it transformative things I think we can do in a Superdome over the course of the next 10 years, which I am convinced we will get done. I know he's convinced. We'll figure out a way to get it done. We'll get it done, and you'll be very proud of the building. But in the meantime, Doug and I and some other folks will be working on the arena, because we have to upgrade the arena. It hasn't really been touched since the 1990s, and we started meeting with a bunch of architects in that area too. And so it really is, going back to an earlier point that you made, if you went to Super Bowl, one of the things that we learned, and Doug heard this over Super Bowl weekend, I heard this a lot over Super Bowl weekend, we love New Orleans. We want to come back here all the time. When you hear it feels like the Super Bowl versus other cities where it doesn't feel like the Super Bowl, we truly take over the city. NFL loves that, but we're running out of space.
Yep.
And we have to figure out a way how to improve the footprint of the space that we have. And I think there's some things that we can certainly do. And I know Daryl knows this too. I think, you know what, if we can continue to invest in our hotel motels, we're going to have to increase the number of rooms too, and you know that as well.
Yeah.
And so we're working with folks to increase the number of rooms in the city as well.
Yeah, and the expansion of the riverfront will certainly help as well in that case. So Jeff, you've chronicled the Saints, the tales from the sideline, the Saints sideline. You've got, and we're going to kind of wrap this up with some really good memories from each one of you. Start with you. Some of your most memorable or funny or interesting moments that you've seen at the Superdome.
Well, I mean, I think we're all going to say probably the same thing. I don't know. How many people here went to the Homecoming game, the first game back, right? I don't think we're ever going to top that night. Just beyond football, the spiritual, emotional power of that night went so far beyond sports. I'll never forget it. My assignment the night before at the newspaper was to cover the event, to set the stage for the event, more so than the game. And I got invited down by Brian McCarthy with the NFL to go down to the Dome the night before for the rehearsal of U2 and Green Day, and to sit in on that. And as I was down there, I mean, there's Bono, Billy Joe Armstrong, two of the biggest bands in the world, are just going to play a pregame musical performance for a regular season game. It's never happened in the NFL, I don't think, and I don't know if it'll ever happen again. That's like a Super Bowl level performance for a pregame show. I think it showed what the NFL thought about that night, giving the global stage to that game and to New Orleans and the recovery of Katrina. And as I listened to that set play out, the three songs were When September Ends, Wake Me Up When September Ends by U2, then it went by Green Day, went right into The Saints Are Coming, which was a remake of a skid song, a punk song, and then the last song was It's a Beautiful Day. I think that symbolism, the power of those three titles, I knew that night, I said, wow, this is going to be unbelievable tomorrow night. And then Steve, of course, capped it off with that block punt, which I always remind people of. The reason I think that thing was it was like a big bang climax was because it happened so early in the game. I mean, block punts very rarely happen at all, but very rarely 90 seconds into a game. It just doesn't happen. I think everyone was still kind of reveling in the musical performance and getting their beers and popcorn, and all of a sudden, bam, this incredible play happened. I'll never forget
Thank
that.
you. Your book with Steve Gleason, by the way, Life Impossible. Oh, fantastic.
No, thank you.
Doug?
Same. I mean, that was pinnacle for me. I mean, I have so many memories. I've spent almost half my life in that building. You know, I practically live there every day, every weekend, every holiday, concerts, football games. But certainly the homecoming game, I could sit here and talk about that forever. There's a lot of stories. The one I will tell you, after the game, of course, Dennis and I were on the sidelines. We watched the Green Day show, and of course, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, including mine. So we win the football game, and after the game, Jimmy Moore Jr. was coaching for the Falcons at that time. He had coached for the Saints, and we're standing on the field. People have left the stadium. The team is walking from the locker room to the team bus, and he sees me standing there, and he's at about the 40-yard line. I'm on the 20, and as he's approaching me, he's just smiling and shaking his head. And he walked up and he said, "We never had a chance." He said, "We were playing against the whole city tonight."
That's right.
But he said, if there was ever a game that we were going to lose, I'm glad we lost this one.
Wow.
That was a direct quote. Anyway, that one was number one. Number two for me, right behind it, probably 1A, was the NFC Championship 2010. And the third one was the Super Bowl after 9/11 when U2 played the halftime performance. That was the first game that was conducted under the National Security Special Event designation at a time when the nation was reeling, and we had to push back the Super Bowl by a week. We almost didn't host it here because we had conflicts. But those were the three memorable moments.
Dennis, why don't you bring us home with
Look,
yours?
all of those, I mean, I remember a funny moment when, believe it or not, we had all of the meteorologists from all the various news channels in our suite before Katrina, and it had nothing to do with it. We usually invited all the media.
Right.
They just happened to be there. By halftime, they were all gone. We were like, wait a second, I thought y'all said it wasn't going to hit. But anyway, and I remember that. No call.
The no call.
No
No
call
call,
was horrible.
yes.
But I'm going to tell you my favorite one, 1977, Supercross in the Superdome. Bob Hurricane Hanna won that night. And I know that because that was the first time I ever went to the Super Bowl as a kid. And I remember coming through the doors to the Supercross and going in that building and said, "Oh my gosh, it's so big." And I was 7, 8 years old. That was my first time that I'd been in the Superdome, and I was completely blown away. So I think about that all the time.
And it's amazing they can bring all that dirt in and then take it all out, right?
650 truckloads of dirt.
Hey, funny story real quick. Michelle and Steve Gleason tell this story we wrote about in the book. After the block punt night, they go out to celebrate New Orleans. They stop by Igor's on St. Charles Avenue to meet some friends. They do shots. They're heading back uptown. And all the friends are yelling out at them. And Michelle leans out the side of the truck and screams at the top of her lungs, "I'm going to blankety blank him for all New Orleans tonight."
Thank you. That's a great way to end. Ladies and gentlemen, Dennis, Doug, Jeff, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us.